The wind had teeth that summer. It chewed the plains to bone and whistled over the carcasses of long-dead cattle, bleached and cracked where they fell. Dust moved like ghosts in the heat, coating everything in a fine, dry rot that turned even bright memories dull. He spotted her just past the north fence line. At first he thought she was a sack of flour some fool left out to rot, half buried in the red earth. But as he got closer, riding slow with one hand resting on the horn of his saddle, he saw a twitch. Then another, a woman, skin like torn parchment, mouth caked in grit. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at nothing at all. "Hey," he said. She didn't flinch. Her eyes were open, but only barely. He dismounted slow, boots sinking into the soft drift. A buzzard called out high overhead. He took off his hat, crouched beside her, and put his hand to her neck. The pulse there was fragile but stubborn, same as most things that survived out here. He poured a swallow of water into the crown of his hat, lifted her head, and coaxed it to her lips. She sputtered, tried to turn away. "You drink," he told her, quiet but firm. Her mouth moved, no sound came, she drank. He brought her back across the flats, slung gentle across his horse, wrapped in his coat. She weighed less than a bundle of fence posts. He talked to her the whole ride, just to keep her tethered even if she never spoke. Told her his name, called her Morrow, owner of Blackstone Ranch, third generation. Said he ran 200 head, had a well deep enough to last another dry year, and no family left but the hands who called him boss. She came to proper on the second night, in the spare bedroom at the back of the house, swaddled in linen soaked with lavender and vinegar. Cook sat with her, but she wouldn't speak to him either, just stared at the shadows. The third day she tried to run, got as far as the pump out back before her legs gave. Calder found her in the dirt again, curled like a dying animal. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he told her. "You're safe here." She didn't answer. She had the kind of face that once was beautiful but not soft, sharp-cheeked, eyes too large for the hollows they sat in. Her hands were work-worn, calloused, nails ragged. He guessed she'd seen 29, maybe 30, but she bore the look of someone older, dragged across too many miles. She told him her name on the sixth day, Mara. There were stories Calder didn't ask for, and ones he knew would come in their own time. Mara's face said both. She kept to the shadows, helped cook in the kitchen without speaking unless spoken to, moved quiet as the wind through the house. But her eyes never stopped moving, watching windows, listening to silence. One morning, Calder found her in the barn, standing still in a ray of light that came through the boards. "You afraid I'll send you off?" he asked. She shook her head. "You think you owe me something." A pause, then a nod. "I didn't take you in for a price," he said. She turned to him then, full. Her eyes were bright with something that wasn't tears, but close. "Everyone takes for a price," she said. He didn't answer, just tipped his hat and left her to the hay and the light. The first time he saw her smile, she was stringing beans with Cook on the porch. It wasn't much, just a twitch of the mouth, but it lingered. "You get many strangers through here?" she asked him that night. "Not many," he said, "too far from the rail, only the ones who mean to be here." She nodded, her hands were wrapped around a mug of coffee, still too hot to drink. "That's good." The silence that followed was not an empty one. He watched her for weeks, not out of suspicion, he didn't need to. Mara didn't steal, didn't sneak. But she carried a tension like coiled wire. Some days it broke loose in nightmares, screams muffled into her own hands. Other days it simmered behind her eyes. One night he found her in the storm cellar, sitting on the steps with her knees pulled to her chest. No storm above, just darkness. "You want me to bring a lamp?" She shook her head. "Sometimes I need the dark." He nodded, he didn't ask why. Harvest came and went with no rain. The wheat failed again. Cattle numbers held thanks to deep water and hard planning. The ranch hands kept quiet when Mara passed. A few smiled, some nodded, none asked questions. One of them tried to grab her arm one evening outside the bunkhouse, half drunk and thinking himself bold. Calder found out and had him gone before sundown. No questions, no warnings. "You didn't have to do that," Mara said that night. "Yes, I did. He didn't hurt me." Calder looked at her long. "Doesn't take hurt to be wrong." Something in her softened. They sat a while by the hearth, fire crackling, dogs snoring. She looked at him the way a starving animal might look at a hand stretched in peace, not quite ready to believe it, but not ready to run. "I had a husband," she said. Calder didn't speak. "He died in Kansas, died slow after bad debts and bad men caught up. I buried him in a town that doesn't exist anymore. Then I ran." She looked into the fire like it had more to say than he ever could. "There was a baby, too. Didn't make it past the fever." He bowed his head. "I don't cry for them," she said. "I did for a while, but crying don't make the dirt softer." Calder rose, walked to the shelf, and poured 2 fingers of rye into a glass. He handed it to her. "To dirt," she said, and drank. By spring, she was sleeping in the master bedroom. Not because he asked her, not because she was made to, but because one night she came in while the wind howled through the shutters and stood beside his bed, silent, shaking. He pulled the blanket back without a word. She slid in beside him and lay stiff as a corpse until morning. But she stayed. She stayed the next night, and the one after. They didn't speak of love. Calder wasn't a man of flowery things, and Mara didn't have room for romance. But in the way he touched her hair when she cried without meaning to, or the way she put her hand on his shoulder when he returned late from the range, those things spoke. The first time he kissed her, it was under the eaves as rain finally came. She didn't flinch. She kissed him back with hunger and sorrow and something wild. It wasn't salvation. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was real. And it was theirs. The rains broke the earth open like a wound that wanted healing. Creeks swelled, cattle waded through knee-deep muck, and for the first time in over a year, green pushed up through the rot. The Blackstone Ranch breathed different in the wet months, its groans softened, its bones stretched. Mara, too, changed in the thaw. She no longer flinched at every backfire or door slam. She wore her hair braided now, tight along the scalp and wrapped like rope. She asked to help Calder ride the south fence line and took to it without complaint, even when the mud reached the stirrups and the air stank of old water and mule sweat. She learned to shoot a rifle, though she said little about why she already knew how to aim it. One morning she rode out ahead of him, just said she wanted to see the ridge herself. When he caught up, she was standing at the cliff's edge, arms crossed, looking down at the lowlands where the fog hugged the canyons like smoke from a dying fire. "I could live here," she said. "You are. I mean really live, not just breathe." He didn't touch her, just stood beside her, let her know he heard. "You're not afraid of what I've done, are you?" she asked, voice low. "No. You should be." She turned and walked away, slow, boots sinking into the sodden edge of the world. A letter arrived that spring, thick paper, neat ink, sealed with wax. Mara opened it at the kitchen table, her hands steady as ever, but her eyes turned cold. She didn't say a word, just burned it in the stove, pressed the cast-iron door shut, and washed her hands twice before returning to the garden. Calder asked nothing. He only sharpened the blades on the thrashing scythe and moved the rifles closer to the door. The next day a rider came, not a drifter, not a neighbor, a man in a gray coat, tall in the saddle and reeking of somewhere east. He carried himself like a man who'd buried others. Calder met him at the gate. "I'm looking for a woman," the rider said. Brown hair, scar above her right brow, quiet voice, might be traveling under the name Mara. Calder didn't blink. Ain't seen her. The man nodded once, slow. You sure? I'd remember. The man stared at him long enough to make it something. Then he turned and rode on. Calder watched until he was a speck. Then he walked back to the barn, where Mara waited, already loading shells into her rifle. You know who he was. She nodded. Is he coming back? Not alone. Calder studied her. You want to run. I want to finish. That night, she told him everything. Her husband hadn't died in Kansas. He'd left her there. Left her bruised and starved, tied to debts she never made. The baby had died, that part was true, but not from fever, from fists. Mara had buried them both, one with grief, the other with fire. She had fled, yes, but not from justice, from vengeance. The man in gray was kin to the one she burned. I'm not sorry I did it, she said, but I'm sorry I didn't kill them all. He didn't speak. I don't need you to forgive me. I'm not the one who needs to, he said. She looked at him then, the way she had that first night he'd poured water into her mouth. Like maybe he was real, and maybe the world wasn't entirely evil. By summer, they were preparing. Blackstone became fortress and crucible. Calder sent the youngest hands into town with wages and goodbyes. Those who stayed were men he trusted, men who knew what it meant to choose a side without flinching. Mara trained harder than any of them. She rose before dawn and shot until her shoulder bruised purple. She set traps along the outer fields, sharpened blades until her fingers bled, memorized the paths between cattle posts and dry creeks. She didn't speak of fear, only of timing. You know they'll wait until fall, she said. Dry winds make it easier to burn. Calder nodded. Then we'll light the fires first. In August they came. 4 men, 1 woman, dressed plain, riding mules and roans like ranchers, but moving too tight, too clean. Mara watched from the loft window. Calder stood in the yard, hands empty, gun within reach. The leader was the gray-coated man from before. His name, they learned later, was Silas Gray. You lied to me, Marrow, he called out. I lied to a lot of men, Calder said. Silas smiled without mirth. She sighed. Calder didn't answer. You know what she did. Don't much care. Silas dismounted. The others followed. The woman with him looked young, hardened, the kind of girl made of too much scar tissue and not enough future. Myra stepped out before Calder could stop her. I did what I had to, she said. You want justice, your year's too late. Silas looked her up and down. You always were the fire starter. She didn't blink, and you always followed cowards. No one drew first. But no one walked away clean. Gunfire cracked through the stillness. The cattle screamed and bolted. The air turned to ash. 2 of Silas's men fell in the first volley. One shot clean through the temple, the other dragging himself by his elbows before Mara put him down. The woman flanked the barn and made it to the loft. Calder's second-in-command caught her before she reached the hay. They died 5 feet apart, both bleeding into the same dirt. Silas didn't run. He moved like a man who thought he'd win, even as his people fell around him. He got close enough to Calder to fire once, the shot tearing through Calder's side. Mara tackled him before he could reload. They fell into the mud, fists flying, teeth bared. She bit his ear, slammed his head into the trough, screamed something in a language older than rage. When she killed him, it wasn't with a gun. It was with her hands. The ranch fell silent again by nightfall. Calder lived just barely. Mara stitched him with shaking fingers, and slept on the floor beside his bed for 3 days. When he woke, she was there, looking at the sunrise through the slats. "You stayed," he rasped. She turned to him, eyes shadowed but steady. "I told you I would," she said. The blood had dried by the time the frost came. Not just the blood of the men they buried behind the stables, but the older stains too, the kind that lived deep in the timbers of the house, in the silences between footsteps, in the places where light didn't reach. The men who stayed rebuilt the corral fence and patched the bullet holes in the bunkhouse walls. No one spoke much of what happened. Ranch hands knew better than to linger on the kind of justice that came with shallow graves. They called her Miss Mara now, not with fear, but the wary respect given to a blade kept clean. Calder healed slow. He wore his pain like he wore his old leather gloves, stiff at first, but broken in with time. The shot had passed clean through his ribs, but took with it some of his strength. He leaned heavier on Mara now, in the quiet way a man does when he's not used to needing anything. Mara didn't speak of what she'd done, not to him, not to herself. But she rose earlier, worked harder, spent her evenings walking the edges of the ranch like she was learning the shape of a life she wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. That winter, they married. No church, no preacher. Just a promise spoken over coffee in cold hands, under a sky the color of old bone. "I don't want vows," she said. "I want truth." "Then take mine," Calder said, "and I'll take yours, and we'll see if that's enough." She kissed him once, said nothing. But she stayed. Trouble has a way of circling back. By late winter, word had spread. The Blackstone Ranch wasn't just a cattle outfit, it was a place where something dark had happened, where a man named Silas and his people went missing, where a woman once starving now walked with a revolver on her hip and a husband who looked at her like she held the sun in her hands. They came not with guns this time, but with questions. A lawman rode in from Abilene, Marshall Tully, hard-eyed and slow-moving, the kind of man who could count bullets by sound and truths by silence. He didn't ask Mara anything. Asked Calder instead, in the parlor with the stove low and the smell of fresh bread hanging thick. "You know a man named Silas Gray?" "No." "You know what happened to him?" "No." "You harboring a fugitive?" "No." "You sure about that?" Calder leaned back. "I'm sure enough." Marshall Tully didn't press. He left without incident. But 2 days later, a second letter came. This one not sealed in wax, but marked with the emblem of the Union Pacific. A rancher further west had filed claim to land that touched Blackstone's border. They wanted an inspection, a survey, maybe more. Calder read it once, then passed it to Mara. "You think they're trying to scare us off?" she asked. "No," he said. "I think they're seeing what we'll do." Mara folded the letter neatly. "Then let's show them." Spring brought strange visitors. A preacher who claimed to be traveling east. A woman selling linens who asked too many questions. 2 boys who weren't boys at all, but grown men with the scent of hired eyes. Myra let them pass, offered nothing but polite nods and cold water. Calder stayed armed in the house for a week straight. Then came the man with the silver tooth. He didn't ask questions, he didn't smile. Just stood outside the house one dusk, silhouetted in the firewash of the sunset, and waited. Mara went to him. "You're not here to buy cattle," she said. He shook his head. "You come from someone who wants to know what happened." Another shake. She narrowed her eyes. "You come to make it happen again." He took out a coin, flipped it, caught it. "I came to see if the stories were true." And he looked her over, not lewd, not cruel, just calculating. "I believe them." He turned and walked back to his horse, left without another word. That night, Mara didn't sleep. She stood at the back door, watching the moon move across the yard. "They won't stop," she said, "not until they make us villains." "We were never saints," Calder said. She looked at him, lips parted like she might speak, then shut them again. Outside, the coyotes howled. The next months passed like breath held too long. Work didn't stop. The calves dropped healthy, the rains came early, and the cattle fetched good money come auction. But underneath it all ran a hum, a waiting, like the ranch itself knew something was coming, something with more teeth than law and more reach than justice. It came in the form of a company. Hollingsworth and Cross, a land syndicate out of Denver with deep pockets and deeper ambition. They bought up everything west of the ridge, claimed water rights, built fences where none had stood. When Calder challenged them, they sent a lawyer with a mustache too neat to trust and a voice like syrup. The man offered Calder a buyout, big money, no strings. Calder didn't take it. 3 weeks later, someone poisoned the water at the south well. 2 dogs died, then a colt. Myra posted watches every night, took the high roof herself. On the 5th night, she caught a man sneaking through the north field, didn't kill him, shot the dirt near his feet, let him run. "They'll send worse next time," Calder said. "Let them," Mara said. "I'll still be here." He looked at her then, really looked. The woman he found starving in the dust was gone. In her place stood someone made of iron and scar. She was still beautiful, but it was a sharp beauty, the kind that drew blood. And she was his. Not because she was owned, but because she had chosen. That night she came to him in the dark, not for warmth, not for comfort, but for claim. They lay tangled in silence, not speaking of war or fear or who they had once been. Only of breath and skin, and the fact that nothing else had ever felt so right. The next attack came at dusk. They set fire to the east pasture, smoked the cattle into panic, tried to draw the men out. But Mara didn't play games. She and Calder rode straight into the fire line, rifles blazing, dogs loosed, traps sprung. They found 2 of the bastards crouched in the grass, matches in hand, lanterns swinging from their belts. Calder shot one through the spine. Mara chased the other into the gulch and broke his leg with a clean shot, left him there with the coyotes. "You don't want to question him?" Calder asked. She shook her head. "I already know the answer." And she did. They were being tested, prodded. They wanted the land, and they wanted the people broken enough to give it. But Myra Morrow didn't break. Not for grief, not for fire, not for men with coins in their eyes and rope in their hands. That night she and Calder sat on the porch, rifles across their knees, and watched the horizon burn. "You think we'll have to kill more?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Think we'll survive it?" She turned to him. Her face, lit by flame and dusk, looked like something carved in stone. "We've survived worse." The hills turned gold with autumn, not the kind of gold that sings of harvest and grace, but the brittle, rattling kind, the color of dying wheat and parched leaves curled in on themselves. Everything on the land had the look of something holding on, thin-limbed and tired, but stubborn. Blackstone didn't just survive the heat, it braced for whatever came next. Mara woke most mornings before light. She didn't dream anymore, not in ways that made sense. Sometimes she'd wake with her hand curled around the knife beneath her pillow, heart racing from ghosts she couldn't name, but she no longer startled. She just rose, checked the traps, and started her day. Calder watched her move through the house with quiet certainty. She had become the spine of the place, as much a part of it as the hearth or the sagging barn doors. Men who came looking for the ranch owner were often surprised to find him standing behind her. The land war escalated. Fence posts were chopped in the night. A windmill sabotaged, its blades crumpled like old tin. One of the hired hands, a young boy named Lou who'd ridden up from Texas, went missing. They found his body 3 days later in a dry wash, throat slit clean. No money taken, no boots missing. Just a message. Mara buried him herself. No priest, just hands in the dirt and a stone set without words. After that, Calder started sleeping with a pistol beneath his pillow, too. By October, the sheriff from over in Crowspain paid a visit. Said the governor's office was receiving complaints. Said something about escalating tensions, open conflict, questions about ownership. They want peace, he said. They'll come heavy if they don't get it. Calder didn't flinch. We've held this land for 40 years. And they'll take it in 40 minutes if it comes to that. Mara stepped forward. What would you do, Sheriff? She asked. He looked at her, his mouth opened, then shut. Finally he said, I'd pick which hell I could live with. After he rode off, Calder sat long in the parlor, the wind groaning through the chimney. They'll bring more than lawyers next time, he said. Mara was cleaning her rifle at the kitchen table. Then we'll bring more bullets. He looked at her. Something old and aching stirred in his chest. You ever think about leaving? He asked. Selling, starting fresh. She didn't even pause her work. No, this land's the only thing that hasn't lied to me. He nodded. I'll die on it if I have to, she said. So will I, he told her. They didn't call it love. They called it what it was, war shared. 2 nights later, a man came crawling out of the dark, half dead, covered in bruises and bleeding from the mouth. Said his name was Joel. Said he'd ridden with Hollingsworth's men for 3 months, setting fires, spying, running wire, but something had turned in him. Guilt, maybe, or fear. They've got a team coming down from Denver. Hired guns, not farmers, not ranchers, killers. How many? Mara asked. 6, maybe more. They don't come in loud. They come in at night, take your teeth before you know your jaw's gone. He spat blood on the floor. They know your name, lady, all of it, Mara Vexley. They know what you did in Kansas. They know what you buried. Mara's jaw didn't move. I got a wife, he said. I didn't sign on to murder. Calder gave him food and a blanket. Mara gave him nothing. When he was asleep, she stood at the edge of the porch and stared out at the stars. They know my name, she said. They always would. Calder stood beside her. If they come, he said, they won't leave. They prepared again, but this time not like before. This time they built trenches behind the sheds, hid rifles in the hayloft, stacked water barrels in the cellar and sharpened every blade from butcher knife to scythe. Mara trained the ranch hands herself, not just how to shoot, how to move, how to hide, how to make a man vanish without a sound. She didn't say where she learned it, but Calder knew. She taught them as if she wouldn't be around to finish it. One night he caught her in the barn, kneeling in front of the old saddle chest, tucking away a small leather pouch. What's that? He asked. Insurance, she said. If I don't make it, there's names in there, places, people who owe me or fear me enough to listen. You think it's that bad? She looked at him. It's always been that bad, she said. He pulled her into him, held her long. Her breath was shallow against his chest. I'm not letting them take you, he said. They won't, she said, but I might have to let them try. The storm broke on the first frost. They came quiet, just like Joel said. 5 riders, dressed like travelers, moving in from the West Ridge under moonless dark. But Mara had posted men on the high trail. They lit the warning flame the moment the strangers passed through the choked canyon. Mara and Calder were already dressed. already armed. By the time the riders reached the yard, the rifles were in place. The gunfight was quick, brutal. One rider was dropped before his horse even stopped moving. Two more scattered when the barn exploded, Myra's trap, set with dynamite and dry hay. The fourth tried to make it to the porch, but Cook put a hole in his chest from the attic window. The fifth got close, too close, took a shot at Calder that grazed his neck and shattered a window. Myra saw red. She came down the stairs like vengeance itself, hair loose, eyes wild, her revolver already spitting fire. She didn't miss. The man was dead before his body hit the boards. When the smoke cleared, the only sound was the cattle lowing in the far pasture and the soft hiss of flame dying in the grass. They buried the bodies beyond the south fence, didn't mark them. "They'll send more," Calder said. Mara nodded, "Then we keep digging graves." That winter, the letters stopped coming. No surveyors, no company men, no law. The name Blackstone began to carry weight, the weight of death, of warning. A few buyers sent feelers, offers whispered through third parties, but no one came in person, not anymore. Mara walked the land every day, not to patrol, just to know it better. She traced the edge of the canyon like it was scripture, sat for hours under the cottonwood tree where they had first kissed in the rain. One day she came back with a drawing. A sketch of a small cabin near the east bluff. Something for them, something away from the main house. "You want to leave the ranch house?" Calder asked. "No," she said. "I want to build something new, something ours, not my past, not your father's, just us." He looked at her hands, calloused and ink-stained. "You want a new start." "No," she said again, firmer. "I want to choose where we end." Spring arrived like a promise kept. Wildflowers clawed up through the ash of old fires. Birds returned to nest in the eaves, singing over the places where men had died with rifles in hand. The Blackstone Ranch breathed deeper that year. Not easy, but steady. The cabin rose slow on the east bluff. Mara built most of it herself, stubbornly, deliberately. Calder helped where he could, despite the stiffness in his shoulder, the way the cold sometimes bit at the old bullet wound. They worked without talk mostly, but each hammer strike echoed with meaning. Every board nailed, every joint carved was a claim, not just on the land, but on the life they were shaping in spite of everything. It wasn't a big place, one room, a narrow porch. A stove she insisted on salvaging from an abandoned church near the edge of town. She painted the door red, said she liked how it dared the world to come knocking. They moved in before the roof was fully sealed, laughed when it rained through the beams and pooled in a corner of the floor, slept wrapped together on the old mattress Calder had dragged up the hill by mule. When they woke, it was to sun spilling through the cracks and the smell of juniper on the wind. "I want to grow old here," Calder said one morning. Mara didn't answer right away. She was watching the valley below, where the fog clung to the earth like regret. "You will," she said. The quiet held through summer. Neighbors began to return. The land, once whispered about like a haunted ruin, found new respect. Ranchers nodded when they passed Calder in town. Some even tipped their hats to Mara. One of the young hands married the cook's daughter. They held the wedding in the barn, just below the bullet holes still visible in the rafters. Mara wore a blue shawl, the only thing she had left from Kansas. Calder danced with her once, awkward and grinning. The laughter that followed felt like something earned. But scars don't disappear, they just fade. And some names don't stay buried. One morning, Mara found a letter nailed to the front gate. No seal, just her full name scrawled in a slant she hadn't seen in years. Inside, a single sentence. "I remember." She burned it without showing Calder. She didn't sleep that night. sat in the rocking chair on the porch, rifle across her lap. The stars were silent above her, the land still. But something in her chest stirred, the old fear, the kind that doesn't run but coils tight, waiting. At dawn, she walked the perimeter, checked the fence, traced her fingers over the trap stones still half buried in the dirt. She came back with dust on her boots and blood in her mouth from biting her cheek too hard. Calder was waiting. "Another enemy?" he asked. "Maybe. You going after them?" She sat beside him. "No," she said, "not this time." "Why not?" She looked out at the bluff, at the cabin with the red door. "Because I'm done letting them follow me." They didn't come. Not in the weeks that followed, not in the months. Myra kept the rifle loaded, the horses saddled, her senses sharp, but the hills stayed quiet, the road remained empty. She kept expecting blood, but what came was a child. The boy showed up in October, barefooted and wild-eyed, no more than 6. He wandered up the trail from the canyon, dragging a scrap of burlap and wearing a coat 2 sizes too big. No one knew where he came from. He wouldn't speak, not at first, just sat on the porch and stared at the red door. Myra gave him water, bread, a place by the fire. Calder fixed a cot. After 2 days, the boy said one word. "Home." Myra tucked the blanket around him that night with hands that shook, not from cold. From memory. From something breaking and healing at the same time. They never found his people. They never asked why he came. They just kept him. Named him Eli. Years passed as they do. The fences aged, the house weathered, the cabin stood strong. Myra's hair turned silver at the edges. Calder walked with a cane. Eli grew tall, lean, strong-backed, learned to ride, shoot, carve names into fence posts the way other boys carved initials into trees. He called them Ma and Pa before he ever asked permission. They never corrected him. Blackstone became less a place and more a legacy. A myth with dirt under its nails and blood soaked into its roots. Travelers passed through less often, and those who did left quickly, eyes low. The past came knocking once more, years later, in the form of a man too young to remember what he spoke of. Said his grandfather once rode with Sela's Gray. Said he'd heard tales of a woman who killed without blinking. Said he wanted to see her. Myra stood behind the screen door, rifle beside her, wrinkles deep around her eyes. "You found her," she said. The boy looked nervous now. "You don't look like a killer." She smiled. "That's the point." She let him drink, let him rest, then sent him on his way with hard bread and a story he could tell but never truly understand. When he left, Calder came to her, slow and wheezing. "Still haunting ghosts." She leaned against him, her body no longer carved from stone, but worn from time. "No," she said, "I'm just keeping the peace." He kissed her forehead. And they sat in silence again, the way they always had. When Calder passed, it was in the spring, with his hand in hers and the smell of sage in the air. No pain, no drama, just breath, then no breath. Mara buried him behind the cabin, beneath the cottonwood where the birds still sang. Eli carved the stone himself. No name, just a mark they both knew. She didn't cry. She sat beside the grave every evening for a season, talking low, like he might still be listening. Then one day, she didn't speak at all. Just listened. To wind. To leaves. To the land that had taken so much and given more. Mara died in her sleep 10 winters later. Eli found her in the old rocking chair, shawl across her lap, eyes closed, peaceful, finally. She had left a note, but not for the world. Just for him. They never took me, not once, not ever. Tell no one my story, just bury me beside the man who gave me back my name. He did. And long after both were gone, the cabin stood. Weather-beaten, quiet. The red door faded to rust. But the legend held. Not of a rich man and a widow. Not of killers or cattle. But of two souls found in the dust who bled and built and stayed. Until no one could take them, until the land itself said yes.